Hello everyone, Mr. Happy here, and in this video we're going to be covering the details that came out of the recent Gamewatch interview with Naoki Yoshida regarding Final Fantasy XIV. Now this was a hell of an interview, and a lot of Japanese media sites actually reported on the same, I guess it was a Japanese media sit-in, so 4Gamer, Gamewatch, and some other websites all have at least somewhat similar information that all released today. Marko did a translation for Gamer Escape on the Gamewatch one. I know there are a few things that were mentioned in the 4Gamer one that weren't in the Gamewatch one, so we'll be sure to cover all those details. Just make sure that in the description of the video you click on the Gamer Escape link, you give them the hits, they deserve the views, give it to them, you know what to do. Anyway, it was a long interview. It was like 30 pages, 25 pages with images, I think 30 pages with, I don't know, 25 pages without images, 30 pages with images. So let's get started. So it's broken up into multiple topics. The first part's going to be talking about patch 3.5 being divided into two parts, and there was a lot of very important information here. So first they touch on directly the main story involving Omega, and just to be clear, we were very unsure if the story was split into two parts just based on the trailer. Even though they told us it was part 1 and part 2, a lot of people weren't sure if there was actually part 2 just because the trailer wasn't explicit about it. Yes, the story is split into two parts, but very few parts from part 2 are shown, and the ones that are shown in such a way that you can't even tell that they're part of the part 2 patch. So January 17th, part 1 of the story, March, part 2 of the story. And there's going to be some more interesting aspects about that because there's a whole jumble of different patches to keep track of here. So there you go. And he goes over it right here, how January 17th, you have the patch, then you have Frankfurt Fan Festival. After that, we have part 2. There's another thing though, and we're going to get to it someplace in here. Apparently patch 3.55 is not the same as patch part 2. Patch 3.55 will actually be coming at the end of February, and the Far Edge of Fate Part 2 will be coming in March. It says it out right here, and I'll have to find it. Let's see. And they talk about the volume of the content and the volume of the main story. He says there are going to be a lot of cutscenes, but there's not one cutscene you're going to sit there for an entire hour like there was with 2.55. There are going to be long cutscenes. They're just going to be split apart in such a way that if you maybe don't have time to view all of them, you'll still be able to enjoy them at your own pace. So definitely, please look forward to it. Hi. Moving into a later part, here is where he mentions it has nothing to do with big cliffhangers like the last one, but this time we intentionally divided it into two parts talking about the patch. The truth is, part 2 will come after 3.5 and 3.55. The third season of the feast will end with 3.55. We will add the continuation of the animal weapons, etc., and after that, part 2 of the patch will come. Now, in the 4Gamer interview, it is actually made explicitly clear that there is part 1 of the Anima questline that is going to be item level 270 and is going to be very hell in terms of completing it, which is the light step that we talked about in the prior video that I released to this. And then in patch 3.55 will be the victory lap version, which will be very easy and should bring your animal weapon up to item level 275. So just wanted to add that little part in there. Let's see, and then he talks about the difficulty of 2.55 versus now what 3.55 is asking you to do. It also confirms right here that they will at some point be raising the scripture cap to 900. He speaks about when they raise the poetic cap to 900 before the launch of Heavensward, but after patch 2.5. He says that this time we have put that on our schedule, so we should definitely expect the scripture cap to raise to 900 at some point or another. Moving forward, let's see, when will patch 3.55 and the patch 3.55 in February, and then patch part 2 is in March, and they're excited, and I'm excited. It's pretty interesting to have, like, I guess it's kind of similar. We had 2.5, the 2.51, the 2.55, and 2.58. This is like 3.5, 3.55, 3.58. So I guess actually a lot of this does make sense. It's very in line with what we had for patch 2.5, but we'll see how it actually turns out. And don't worry, he says, I know it's a lot of the Empire in the trailer, but Alamigo, we're going to Alamigo. Like, Alamigo's going to be in the trailer. And they said that they specifically can't really show much of the Griffin in the trailer because there's one very important scene with him that they absolutely don't want to show in the trailer. So I'm really excited for that. There's a part that comes to mind from the trailer that's not visual, but it's heard that I think we all kind of have an expectation of that being the part that he's referring to. They also talk about Yugiri returning to the main story, about how she's been doing a lot of work with Limsa Lominsa and the immigrants and whatnot. So she's been really doing stuff behind the scenes. So she suddenly comes back and is a part of the story again, and they want to make sure that that we enjoy her appearance and that it actually makes a lot of sense. Moving on, we have to talk about the content itself, and we got to start with Zurvan, aka the Cake Man. With Zurvan, there will finally be a conclusion to the Warring Triad quest. We will find out the truth behind Unokalhai. Let's see. Yes, here we go. We will find out the truth about Unokalhai. We'll figure out what happens to Regula. There's going to be a lot of different story themes here. The connection with Hydaelyn and the Mother Crystal, the Void, and parallel worlds. And there's going to be a lot of details about the world of Eorzea and where it stands in the grander scheme of things. I'm very much looking forward to that. Now, as for Zurvan, you guys may remember that when the last live letter happened, there was a comment about its difficulty compared to A12 Savage. At the time, there was no confirmation that they were specifically referring to Savage, and instead they were just drawing comparisons to the difficulty of Alexander and Sophia. Now we have confirmation that Zurvan's difficulty is indeed being compared to that of A12 Savage. Now, let's just be clear. They don't explicitly say Zurvan will be as hard or harder than A12 Savage, and let's be honest, that's incredibly unlikely. What is stated here, however, is that because so many people have been clearing the Creator Savage Tier 4, in other words, A12 Savage, they would like to make sure Zurvan is a higher difficulty than normally expected. This may mean a fight closer to the Thordan difficulty as opposed to something along Sophia's difficulty. It does not mean Zurvan will be as difficult as A12 Savage. And he especially says that because item levels are going to increase so rapidly after he's released, they want to make sure that he's not like completely worthless immediately. So you should expect Zurvan to be a moderately difficult fight. It's going to be on the difficult side. Will be higher than the usual difficulty. Says it right there in words. So, you know me, I'm always a fan of a challenge, but I'm looking forward to Zurvan as the finale of the Warring Triad quest. Now, moving on, he talks about SARS Wall, which is part of the main story. He talks about Small Hard Mode, and he says that they made sure the atmosphere of SARS Wall is actually pretty different from the Praetorium and Castra Meridianum. And on top of that, they said they'll put some first coil situations as well, so I think it will feel good for the player to go full power. Finally, Garlean weapons will pop out too, so staff would be happy if players who would like the old FF title would keep an eye out, specifically mentioning that first boss, which a lot of you made sure to point out. If you go back and watch the first boss, the 2 Magitech armors that come out, if you've played the old school Final Fantasy games, you should recognize who those characters are. If not, read the comments section. They'll tell you. Anyway, so just some quick comments about SARS Wall, and then also talking about Samal and how it feels very driven by nature, all the lava, and feels very dynamic. They want it to feel very much like Zelphatol, where you know, you have flexibility in the dungeon, or you can speed things up if you do things a certain way, or you can just do it, you know, at a normal pace. It's mostly referring to destroying the balloons inside of Zelphatol when they drop off the ads. Like, ignore the ads, get the balloon, so that way no more ad spawns. It'll speed up your dungeon. He wants to make sure there's choices like that in dungeons where players can choose to tackle the large amount of enemies and take care of this other thing second, or take care of the main hub first and then take care of another objective second. So and also just expect a lot of natural elements from the dungeon. Looks like a good dungeon to me. Now, talking about Dunskaith, the 24-man, they wanted it to feel very Final Fantasy-esque, especially with Death Gaze. Just remember, there's no rails. Yoshi P even makes a joke that says, you know, we have a reputation of having handrails and then destroying them. We're just destroying them way earlier in the fight this time, as in before you actually start it. So have a good time. He says even maybe 10 people fall off. Who knows? 8 people, 10 people, who knows? They also talk about some of the different fights that are in there. Let's see, where do we have that? Yeah, so we have, for example, he mentions Diabolos, who is deliberately not shown much of in the trailer, they said. And on top of that, they also want to talk about Ferdiad, who they went full trickster mode, where apparently he juggles orbs, and then depending on the color of orbs he's juggling, different mechanics can happen. So again, very interested to see the difficulty of Dunskaith. If all goes according to plan, it should be similar in difficulty to the Weeping City, based on the comments they made after the Weeping City launch. So I'm all good with that. So let's see how Ferdiad's got tricking up his sleeve. I don't know, I wanted a cool line. It doesn't sound cool. Whatever. Now, talking about revamping the Diadem. Now, just as a reminder, the Diadem is due for, I don't know. You know what? Where does it say? Does it say 3.55? Does it say part 2? Where does it say anything? No, how will the Diadem ultimately look? Guaranteed rewards. We'll go back up to all of this, so I'm just making sure. Let's see. Nope. Yeah. Okay. So I don't recall if it's in patch part 2 or if it's in 3.55. He says in one of the recent releases, the live letter or in an interview or something. I don't remember right now. It's either going to be the end of February patch in 3.55 or March for part 2. I believe it is specifically slated for part 2. No, actually, I think it's slated for 3. You know what? Whatever. The information's out there. Someone in the comment section will remember. I can't focus on that right now. We got to focus on the new Diadem. So first he talks about the struggles of the original Diadem, about how he got a lot of feedback from the developers, from people who played 1.0, from people who played Final Fantasy 11, about how there's no content where you can really just get lost and just look for stuff. You know, you're always on the set A-B path and it's boring repetition. So they wanted to create the Diadem to give people power of freedom. Unfortunately, you run into situations, and even looking back at Total Rock, where if a player takes a path that's the suboptimal path, it is not the fastest possible path, he gets scolded very often. It's a very common thing, and the same was technically with the Diadem. And then you had some people would just join the party, and they would go gather, while other people wanted to fight, and then you didn't have enough people to reliably do either thing, and it was just a complete mess. So by creating 2 separate queues, with a gathering queue and a battle queue, as well as creating set objectives that you can complete, and then giving you the choice of complete freedom, then there's a lot more that opens up when it comes to the Diadem. You're capable of doing a whole lot more when it comes to the Diadem. So here's what they're going to be doing. When you queue into the Diadem, whether it's, I believe, as a battle or a gathering job, House Halenart gives you a list of tasks that every time you complete one, updates. You know, go to the Northeast Island and collect crab claws for me, or go to the westernmost island and then beat this many of this enemy. And then once you've completed 4 of those objectives, you'll be done. And he says that should take about 20 minutes, by the way. So complete 4 objectives takes about 20 minutes from flying all over the map to completing the objective. But there are things like fates that'll spawn around the map that give you bonus rewards. They give you chests such as items that you can take, such as the ones in Palace of the Dead, the Accursed Horde, where you take these items and you bring them to an NPC and it gives you like a random item back, whether it's glamour or gear or materia or whatever. You're going to be able to earn items through a method similar to that. So if you stick around after the 20 minutes and you don't exit the Diadem immediately, you can choose to farm these fates. Maybe you farm them as 5 people because 3 people wanted to leave. Maybe you just join another party. Like maybe you're the only one left, but there's another party doing the fates, so you go and you join them alongside them. You're given options on how to do it. Maybe you want to do gathering after the 20 minutes. You're free to do that. You know, there's a lot of different options when it comes to how you enjoy the Diadem, but you have a set objective of why you're going in there in the first place. On top of that, you also have the part in the center, which I think we could talk about right here. The boss fight from the trailer looked like. So basically, you will need at least 4 parties to defeat the boss in the trailer. When the sky of the area changes, you go to the middle and you go to the mysterious ruins, and then you'll want as many parties together as possible in order to defeat these enemies. You could go in with 9 parties if you want, but the 4-party minimum will definitely be important. And they want to make sure that this lack of requirement is utilized when Eureka the Forbidden Land comes out as well, because players will definitely want as many players around to complete some of the content in Eureka the Forbidden Land versus the Diadem, where you kind of have this set idea of at least 4 parties. So curious to see how that actually ends up working out, but the more they describe it, the more Eureka and Diadem sound similar, even though he specifically says Eureka is a completely different type of content. So I don't know. I'm still thinking Eureka is going to be a lot like this new Diadem, and we'll just get a better idea. And this is almost like getting feedback for things that they should and shouldn't do inside of Eureka. Now they talk about the jump potion again. Here's a topic that we can just never get away from. So let's cover the most important parts. He's been listening carefully to people, and he says that currently they're on the side of voting it in. There's 7-3 vote in the actual development team to add it. 7 people in favor of adding it, 3 people who are not in favor. Now that's of course a ratio, but for every 7 people who do want to add it, there's 3 people who don't want to add it. And they are very carefully looking at all the data they have from China and Korea, the way people use the potions. You know, for example, most people tend to not buy a jump potion in those regions until they're 30 or 40 and they're kind of invested in the game. They've learned the basics. They have somewhat of an understanding of their job. And then most people that afterwards then do data research online. He also says that they are not, and here, are you giving out free potions to new players? No. They have not given out any free potions. It is a strictly paid function for you to use these things. So you really have to be dedicated to the idea of doing this when you decide to purchase it. Now, to be honest, those are completely different markets. I don't think that reflects in our market at all. I think in our market, you're more likely to get people to make the purchase right off the bat, even if it's not free, than you are in the other regions where people generally get the 30 or 40 first. So that's just a difference in culture. I don't know if it'll necessarily apply to us, but he also just outright says, listen, if people don't want, here, let me find it. Let's see. Will the potion come before 4.0? No. If it were to be implemented, what would be the timing? If we were to implement it before the release, many people would think it's pay to win. WoW did that with Legion. They implemented the potion before the release of the expansion, but they can do that because they are already used to jump potions. That is not the case for 14. It would destroy the game. So no jump potion before the expansion. He said this already. This is nothing new. But he says right here, these are just data results, and I'm not trying to tell players to not discuss it. He's basically not saying you're wrong by discussing whether or not it should be added. So you shouldn't feel bad for either thinking it's wrong or not wanting to discuss it or wanting to discuss it. It's just he wants people talking about it. If players really don't want the potion, we won't implement it with the release of 4.0. So, I mean, if you're that hard-voiced about it, that's not a phrase. If you're that loud about it, there's a chance it may not be added at all. But at the very earliest, it wouldn't be added until after 4.0 anyway. Match people who get used to the game to the extent. However, we won't be doing that this time. Do you have any messages for the players? Okay, so basically he just talks about the jump potion here. And he talks about whether or not they would do like a Hall of the Intermediate. And that's where they talk about all that information, where the way people have used the jump potions in the Chinese and Korean versions implies that they don't need a Hall of the Intermediate, because most of the people who purchase the potion are invested in the idea of playing the game. They are so invested, they are willing to spend this extra amount of money to get to the higher levels. And that's implied that, you know, they will perform at least okay at the higher levels. They're willing to research, they're willing to learn things, and I just don't know how it applies to the West. I'm not convinced that that is how people in the West would treat such a potion. I feel like they would just buy it right off the bat. But unfortunately, I can't really delve too much into that because I don't have any facts to back it up. You know what I mean? I could look at Legion, but Legion gave you a free potion, and this is a forced potion purchase. And in the case of what they told us, it's 2 forced potion purchases, because if you buy the leveling one and you don't do the main story one, you still got to slog through all those main story quests. So realistically, you're not going to buy just the one on its own, unless you're somebody who, as he states here, maybe wants to level a 2nd or 3rd job on an account that's already max level, which was another very common use of the jump potion in the other regions, just because sometimes people don't have the time to play, so they can't level up a 2nd or 3rd job. And he's like, well, then here, you got this option. If you really want it that bad, then here you go, but you're gonna have to learn how to play it somehow. And he says that the Hall of the Novice, that doing the low-level dungeons to get used to certain ideas will probably be sufficient. I'm still of the idea, in general, not even just for jump potions, in general, that the game could use a Hall of the Intermediate feature where players can learn a little bit more about their job and how specifically their job abilities work in conjunction with one another. The problem, of course, is that that needs to be updated anytime any major balance changes or reworks or new expansions are released. So there's always that struggle, but there's always going to be that struggle. Yoshi P admits there's always going to be that struggle. So what the heck? It's nothing new, right? But anyway, thank you, Marko, for doing this crazy large translation right here. Let me just see if there are any other things that were in the 4Gamer interview that are not necessarily in the Gamewatch one. So here we go. Ether Oil and Umbrite adjustments will be coming on the final part of the Anima Quest, meaning 3.55. So it looks like, based on that translation, and this also comes from Arthurs, who did some translations on Twitter, that it won't see a nerf until February, the Umbrite and the Ether Oil steps. So, sorry. I'm not the one who makes the decision. What am I apologizing for? Let's see. Next Anima stage will come. Yeah, okay. I'm just making sure that there are a few things here. Oh, the Proto Ultima encounter from Fan Festival. Yes, that will be added sometime after Fan Festival. It looks like 3.55 is the likely day for that one. And it will actually drop accessories that people can use. Now, just as a reminder, Proto Ultima is currently just a dude who spawns a fate out in Az's Law, but he was a special 24-man encounter that you could fight at the Fan Festivals, North America and Japan, and we of course are presuming he will be available in Europe as well. They are releasing this 24-man trial, the first ever of its kind, into Final Fantasy XIV, bumping the difficulty up slightly so it matches something similar to the Weeping City, and giving it the reward of accessories. It'll probably be pretty good accessories, and it's been so long since the trial has dropped accessories. You don't know how happy that just makes me to hear. They'll probably be item level 260 to match the Dunskaith, but it's still accessories. It's just been so long since we've had that I'm so excited for that. But anyway, we'll have more to look forward to later on. Looking forward to seeing what item level everything turns out being, especially those Zurvan weapons with the increase in difficulty. But we'll just have to wait and see. Thank you for watching this video. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share. And stay tuned for all the latest news, information, guides, everything coming up on patch 3.5, and of course, Stormblood. But anyway, thank you for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one. And until then, take care.